Do you know the difference between short-term and long-term food storage? Hi, I'm Kylene.
And I'm Jonathan, and we are the Provident Preppers. Sometimes food storage terminology can be a little bit confusing, and one of our viewers asked if we would describe the differences between long-term and short-term storage.
In this video, we'll not only describe the difference, but we'll help you understand why you need to have both.
Some of our viewers have asked what the difference is between short-term and long-term food storage. And that's a valid question, something that we will answer in this video.
One of the things that I want to point out right now is if you look at this storage room, it has both short-term and long-term foods in it.
Let's get started with short-term food storage. These are your everyday foods, the things that you go through all the time. Your short-term storage is like having a little grocery store in your own home.
Short-term food storage has a shelf life of roughly 3 to 5 years. Some foods will have a shorter shelf life and some may actually last for 8 or 9 years, but generally you're looking at a shorter shelf life. That means that these foods should be rotated through on a regular basis. Examples of foods that you would store in your short-term food storage are canned goods and packaged foods, and this includes things like breakfast cereals, chips, crackers, boxed meals, all of those kinds of things.
As well as your beverages. Again, these are things that you're going to go through on a regular basis.
I buy a lot of the foods that we eat in bulk. For instance, here you can see that we have sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, and even some coconut. While I do put these bulk foods in glass jars or sometimes plastic containers, they are still part of my short-term storage and something that we rotate through on a regular basis.
Don't those look great? Your home bottled goods are also part of your short-term storage because for optimal flavor and nutrition, you want to go through those in a reasonable amount of time.
Short-term food storage needs to take care of your special needs. Last year, we decided to challenge ourselves and go for 90 days without going to the grocery store, which meant that we had to live off of our stored foods and what we could produce in our garden. You might want to check out some of our videos that we produced during that time because you'll learn a lot. One of the things I learned about myself is that I need chocolate. It's not just a want thing. When I was out of chocolate, I was not a nice or happy person. So we need to stock up on more chocolate so that Mama's happy. But seriously, the special needs that you need to consider are things like baby formulations. And if you have any elderly or people that are compromised, perhaps you need meal replacement drinks. Seriously consider the special needs that you have in your family and make sure that you design your food storage plan to include those needs.
Your short-term food supply should also include food for your pets.
We consider frozen foods as part of our short-term food supply. Now, this is a bit controversial because in the event of a power outage, we risk losing that entire freezer full of food. We have taken certain precautions to help minimize that risk. For instance, we have a generator and a fuel supply where we could run that freezer for a few hours every day off of a generator until the power is restored. Or if it looks like it's going to be an extended power outage, we have the ability to pressure can that meat because we've got the skills and the supplies and everything we need to accomplish that. But you know, there's just not going to be any way to save the ice cream, so we'll have to eat all of that.
So sad.
Okay, that was your short-term food supply. Very important to have that. But now let's transition and talk about your long-term food supply. These are basic survival staples that you would need in the event of an extended crisis. This food supply is intended to supply you with the basic calories and nutrition that you need to sustain life. These foods should all be low in moisture and low in oil in order to store for an extended period of time. The foods in your long-term food storage have a shelf life of between 15 and 30 years. Now that depends on the variety of food that it is, the storage conditions, and the packaging. The buckets of food storage under this bed frame is enough for the 2 people that sleep in that bed to have a survival food ration for an entire year. Long-term food storage has to be packaged very carefully in order to extend the shelf life so that it will last for that extended period of time. Not every food can be stored long-term. There's only a very select group of foods that are eligible for long-term storage. And we talked a little bit about how those foods have to be low in moisture and low in oil. Many grains, such as wheat, spelt, kamut, rolled oats, steel-cut oats, white rice, and corn, are good candidates for that long-term food supply. However, brown rice is not, because it's higher in oil and it will go rancid in a short period of time.
Legumes also make up an important part of your long-term food storage. Things like beans and lentils and peas. These will store very well for a long period of time and provide great nutrition and life-sustaining calories.
And Ben's favorite, pasta. Again, not every pasta is eligible for long-term storage, but two kinds of pasta that will store for an extended period of time are spaghetti and macaroni. And the same thing goes for potatoes. We have 5 different varieties of mashed potatoes that have been packaged in number 10 cans. The can in the center are potato pearls, which are incredibly delicious. All you do is add water and they really have some tasty mashed potatoes. However, they are high in oil and have a shelf life that really can't exceed about 10 years, even if stored in a cool place. But on the lower left, you'll see potato flakes. The potato flakes are just dried potatoes, and they have a 30-year shelf life. The point we're making is that it's important to understand exactly what you're storing, because some you really need to rotate sooner than others. Dried or freeze-dried vegetables are another candidate for your long-term food storage. My very favorites are dried onions, dried carrots, dried celery, and dried peppers. Those are staples in my long-term storage just because of the way that they are able to flavor the other basic food storage. Make sure that any vegetables that you store, they have to be dry enough to snap. And the same thing goes for the fruits. They have to be dry enough to snap. Raisins or those wonderful squishy apricots, they are not good candidates at all for long-term storage. Hey, they're great for short-term storage in their original packaging, just not long-term storage.
Sweeteners are also an important part of your long-term storage. Things like white sugar and honey and maple syrup. These will make your foods taste good and also act as preservatives.
Salt is an important part of your long-term survival food supply. If you click the card in the corner, we have written a post that will tell you everything you ever needed to know about salts, the varieties, and which ones to store, and how to store them well. One of the things that's important to note, though, is that not all salt has an indefinite shelf life. Iodized salt should be stored with your short-term food supply because the iodine in it is only good for about 5 years. But there are other varieties of salt that can practically store forever. Baking soda is another basic that I always keep in my long-term food supply, and it has an indefinite shelf life. When you're storing powdered or dried dairy products, make sure that you only store non-fat because they will have the longer shelf life. But even at that, we've only got a shelf life of about 10 or so years for dry milk. And powdered eggs will only go to about 10 years if you're really pushing it. They're better at 8. Well, okay, dried powdered eggs are really never good, but don't push it past about 10 years.
Now that you understand the difference between a short-term and long-term food supply, where do you start? Well, eventually we think you need to have both, but we think it's important that you get started with your short-term food supply. This is the food that's going to sustain you through a job loss or through a little trial or whatever.
Or a pandemic.
Yeah, whatever it may be. This is what you can rely on to help get you through that. After you get that short-term supply, we highly recommend that you start working on your long-term supply as well.
Whether it's short-term storage or long-term storage, it's important that it is packaged correctly in cool, dry, dark location. My sister and I, before Y2K, both went out and bought a bucket of pinto beans from the same store. My sister didn't have a basement to store it in, so she stored it in her garage for many years and then on the side of her house. Those beans are in the bottom bucket. You can see how they're dark and they have a shiny appearance. My beans were able to be stored in a cool basement. They are in that cup on the left-hand side. That's quite a contrast just due to storage conditions. Now to take it a step further, you can see the beans that are in that number 10 can, and the quality of that number 10 can is even higher than my beans that were in the bucket. And those were stored correctly. The only difference was the packaging. A number 10 can with an oxygen absorber is an amazing way to extend the shelf life of foods. We invite you to visit The Provident Prepper, the difference between short-term and long-term food storage, to learn more.
Also check out more of our videos, including creating a 3-month food supply. This will help you understand how to create your supply tailored to your family's needs.
And check out Survival Food Storage. In this video, we go through how to build your long-term food storage plan and the amount that you need per person, some different ways to go about it, the best storage conditions, everything you need to know to get started building your plan.
Check them out.
There you go. Now you know. It's time to get started building your home food storage program.
And now for the question of the day. What methods have you found to be most effective as you build your food storage program? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.